Hey folks, Gary here. Happy Wednesday morning to you. I hope you're having a really good start to your day. We've been looking at prayer for the last several weeks, probably last month. It's just the beginning of July, so there we go. But a good part of June and now. Why are we looking at prayer? Why are we spending so much time on this? Because it's really, really important. God desires an intimate relationship with you, and we should desire that same relationship with Him. And you're not going to have that if you don't talk to each other, if you don't have a conversation with each other. So it's having a conversation with God, just sitting down and saying, Lord, here I am. And that's something that's available to everyone. So it would make sense that we'd want to do it fairly well, that we'd want to really get everything we can out of prayer. Now, for the last several weeks, we've been referring back to Matthew chapter 6 from time to time, looking at the Lord's Prayer and how Jesus taught his disciples how they should pray. And we're going to do the same thing this week. We're looking at verse 13 in Matthew chapter 6. And you probably know it. It's where Jesus tells the disciples to pray, Lord, don't lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Well, that brings up a question. Would God tempt you? Is God setting a trap for you? No, God is not doing that. We have other scripture that says that God is not evil, so he's not going to tempt you to do evil. God just will not do that. So why do we have this in scripture? Well, we have this in Matthew 6 because the word for temptation and the word for test or trial is the same word. And so a lot of people believe when Jesus writes this, what he's saying is, don't let us give into temptation while we're in trial, while we're being tested. Because when you're being tested, you're in a position where you might give into temptation because you have an adversary who takes advantage of those moments and says, hey, here's the easy way, do this instead. Well, we don't want to give into that. And so the NLT probably phrases it a little better where the NLT says, hey, don't let us give into this. Don't let us give in to that temptation. And so that's the prayer. It's like, Lord, when you are testing us, don't let us give in to the temptation over here. Instead, let us get through this test and do it really, really well. I want to look at Hebrews 11, verse 17. And it's about God testing Abraham. And it goes like this. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promise, was ready to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Now, here's the deal about this. Abraham didn't sacrifice him because God intervened and said, don't do it. I was testing you to see if you would. What was the test? The test was to see whether Abraham loved and valued the promise God made to him, the fulfillment of that promise, if he valued that more than he valued God. Sometimes God will really bless us with amazing things, but sometimes those things end up becoming the idol in our life, and we worship that instead of God himself. And so that was the test. Are you going to worship this, or are you going to worship me? And Abraham passed that test, and of course, God stopped him. And it's also a great story. Read it in Genesis because it's actually a foreshadowing of Jesus, and it's pretty cool. But there was a test on Abraham. Was the test for Abraham or a test for God? Well, God already knew Abraham. He already knew what Abraham was going to do. But the test was for Abraham that he would know, that he would understand that God is number one in his life. And it was a proof to him with that. Sometimes we don't want to be tested and we say, I don't like that. My daughter is kind of like that. And what I mean by that is this. She comes and visits us and it's awesome. We love it when she comes here with her dog. And, it's like every 4 weeks or something like that, or maybe less. And when she comes, the first thing that she does, because I tell her to, is she will park her car where the Corolla is. She'll park her car right there, and I'll pop the hood and I'll start looking all over the car, underneath and under the hood and stuff. And she doesn't like that because I'm testing her car. I'm looking for weaknesses. I'm looking for problems. And I do that because, well, she lives a little ways away from us. And so if something happens, it's hard for me to get there and help her. I'd rather find out now. I'd rather see it now. And so I test the weaknesses and then we replace what's weak. Now, she doesn't like that because she doesn't want to have to replace those things. But you'd rather do it now than later. It's the same thing with God testing us. I'd rather know my weaknesses in my relationship with Him now than later on when I'm in a moment of crisis. I'd rather know it now so I can deal with it now. I can understand it now. I can have Him deal with it and say, Lord, I am weak in this area. Would you help me? Would you strengthen my faith? And it's so much better to do it now than it's to do it later. So don't be fearful of that. Remember, it's deliver us from evil. In other words, show me where I'm weak so I don't fall for that. All right, have an awesome Wednesday, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.